Hello and welcome, and in this section I'm going to be talking about and demonstrating eDocs and customer remittances. So what are eDocs customer remittances? Probably fairly obvious, but let's run through the basics. This is the ability to bring in accounts receivable / customer remittances electronically into Greentree. This can be done either from importing from an email address and or a network folder. Transactions on the said remittance can then be matched either manually or automatically using scraping against transactions against the customer in Greentree. So in effect, there's two forms of eDocs and customer remittances that can occur here. So an eDoc only, so that would just be a manual import of the transaction and then matching it manually. And the eDoc with what we would call line scraping and matching, clearly with volume in mind, either volume of remittances that are coming in and volume of lines on that remittance. Anyway, let's have a look at the two options. Okay, so in this first option, I'm going to go through what I call manual matching. So that's just the straight import via a file or from an email address of a customer remittance and then manually matching it against the transactions in Greentree. So just to show my machine here, I have an AR remittance that I've just placed in a folder just on my machine, but this could be a network drive as well. In Greentree, just going to bring that transaction in. So there it is there. It's a customer remittance. And there's my remittance that's been imported. Let's make that a bit bigger. Okay, because I'm manually matching here, the system has no idea who the customer is, what the date of the statement is, or any of the lines that are on that remittance. So like all systems, here's one I've created earlier. I'm just going to put an end of the month and this customer. And I'm looking across to the lines that are on that remittance. So in this example, I've only got a couple of lines. And I happen to know that it's these two lines here. First of all though, and this can be done in a different order, but at some point I need to put the total of the remittance on. So the total on my remittance is 180.90. It's these two invoices here. What I'm looking for is to get this matched value to be green. That means everything ties up nicely. If it's not, as you can see, it's red, and therefore it won't be able to be processed any further. What you'll notice as well, what I've got on this matching screen, is I've got this So Children, allowing me to use Greentree's ability of parents accounts. I click that, and for example, this code here of 1003, that's the customer code. So these invoices are seen on that customer, but I can match it on this remittance, as you would when you're getting a remittance that covers across several accounts. Once this is green, once I'm happy I've matched everything, in terms of that manual matching process, I can then just click on the generate. So what the generate does in this instance, it goes off and does that cash matching, or the receipt entry, if you like, of that remittance against those AR invoices. Sorry, struggling to get my words out there. So I'll click generate. Now just to show that there's no smoke and mirrors going on there, I'm just going to go into the receipt entry. Hopefully it's the last one in the list there. And what you'll notice as well now, there's my invoices that it's matched up, that I manually matched on that screen. I've also got this eDoc remittance tab here now available. Go into here, there's some other ones I've got, but here's the one that I've just done. Got some other transactions floating around there. there's my 180, there's when I've done it. If I wanted to, I can go back and still see that remittance. So it's still there in the system. I don't need to print it out, file it away anywhere, put it in a folder. So again, that's been posted through as per normal, and I can still track that remittance back. So again, pretty quick, pretty brief, but in terms of that manual matching, that's all it is. I'm just picking the transactions up straight off that remittance that's on that screen in front of me. Okay, for the second option on eDocs and customer remittances, I'm going to introduce the concept of when the customer remittance comes in, I'm going to scrape, or the system is going to scrape the remittance. So by what we mean by scraping the remittance, and for those that are not familiar with it, is that the system reads or scrapes, as the name came about, the remittance to find out what information it can. So in this example for the customer remittance, it's going to look to see who the customer is, what the date of the statement is, the value of the statement is, and what the lines on that remittance are. So therefore, it's going to look to bring in as much information as possible from that remittance. Obviously, this makes it, you save time, makes it more efficient in terms of without having to look up a lot of that information or go and find them. Particularly relevant with large volumes, so large volumes in terms of numbers of remittances coming in, and also volumes in terms of the line volume, the lines that are on that remittance. So remittances that are several pages long. This is obviously a much more potentially efficient way of handling that. Okay, so again, I've got an example here. I've got a remittance. I have placed it just on an input folder, just on my local machine, but it could be a network drive. It can be done by email as well, but just because I'm going to step through the process here, I'll do another example in general concept of how that emailing works and just showing it through, so there's no smoke and mirrors going on. But I'm going to bring this remittance in. It's going to be sent, as we call it, to be scraped, and then it will return the document with the details that it can find. I'll talk through how it finds those documents and then how you process it. Okay, so there's my document. I'm going to, just in Greentree here, I'm just going to import that document in. So just by refreshing, it's going to process it. And there it is. So it's transaction number 123 there. So that's an eDoc transaction. It's bringing it in, so it appears there as being scraped. It doesn't stay there for long, but at least I can see at any one time what documents are being scraped. This is a bit like an in and out tray, so you'll see documents coming in and out, especially if they're being processed by email as well. So let's just wait for that document to be scraped. Okay, so my document, my customer remittance in this instance has been scraped. Status here, we'll talk about statuses again. So it now says ready for coding, so it's waiting there. So let's just go into this customer remittance and talk about it. Nothing new that we haven't seen before in terms of the document and how it works. There's my remittance that's picked up there. This one's a fairly standard one. Fairly straightforward one in terms of just got a couple of lines on it. It's found, it knows who the customer is, or it's found the customer. Talk about that in a second. It's got the date, so it's scraped in the date. As you'll see, the date says the 25th of March. There's the 25th of March over there. It's brought in the value, so $180.90. There's my $180.90 there. Here's all my, this is a demo system, so I've got lots of invoices sitting there. So here's all the invoices that are open and therefore waiting receipt for this customer. And down below, the bottom section here, I'll just move that across, is here is the lines that it has scraped in on that remittance. Okay, so first of all, a couple of things to talk about in terms of how does it know that customer. So it finds that customer. This is part of the setup. So on my type transaction, which we'll go through in a setup video that I'll talk about the general concepts of setup. On the scrape, there's an option here that says look up customer by email address. So it looks on the scraping of the document, it says what's my email address. So I'll just close that for a second, just refer back to the document, and there's an email up there. So it's looking for an email. Part of the smarts of the scraping is it knows what an email address looks like. So it's looking for that email there. My system has told it that I'm allowed to go and look up the customer by email address. Which email address is it picking up? Just going to jump into my customer here. Apologies for the jumping screens. On my eDocs tab, on the customer, on my setup, there's an email addresses within the setup tab within eDocs. So a couple of levels there. And there's my emails. So I can set those email addresses up. If you had a branch scenario where you might be getting it from various branches, you can have multiple email addresses there. For the customer remittances point of view, ignore that validated question, so it's just an email that's coming in. Okay, so it's found that customer. Of course, I can change the customer. It might have something wrong, or it might not actually be able to find that customer. So I can just select the customer as I normally would, and it will just load any invoices or transactions that are sitting there against it. So down below these lines that it has scraped in from my invoice. So it says, okay, from your scraped document. And again, we'll talk about the concept in the setup about how it knows where there is and about training a document. That's a general concept in eDocs, not just for customer remittances. So there's my invoice numbers, my transaction numbers, and here's the dates that it's brought in, and here's the amounts. So how does it know? Well, first of all, there's a concept of recognizing the document in terms of the scraping. But what's it matching on? I'm about to match. And you can still do manual matching from here. That's not a problem. Yep. If there's transactions that hasn't recognized in terms of the scraping, or I want to move some around, it's not a kind of trying to force you down one road, so to speak. But I'd also like to introduce another thing at this stage as well. So I'm just going to scroll down a bit because there's like any system, I've set this up nicely before, but it's the general concept and the work through of what we're doing here. How's it matching? What's it looking for when I'm about to match? It's looking for a reference and it's looking for the original amount. Okay, I'm going to bring up, as you can see, I'm only got one invoice sitting there and it's going to find that, as you'll see in a second. But I want to bring show children in because this is obviously quite important, especially when you're getting, from my experience, large remittances. And what I mean by large remittances is many, many pages per month. And of course, you might have quite often in that scenario, because it's multi-branch, you've got a parent account. So invoices are being raised at different branches, offices around the place, but the remittance is coming from one. So you've got one remittance covering many branches, as we know when we send it out in reverse the other way in Greentree. So there's those two invoices, and you'll see the code, that 1003 that's sitting there, that's the other customer. So it's looking at customer 1003. I'm just going to simply match here. And while mine is nice and even in this, from this point of view, there's what it's saying is fully matched. And what you'll notice at the top here is the scraped was the remittance total. The matched value is now in green because it does fully match. Ticked those invoices. I did none of those. The system, and it gave me a message here, fully matched. So what I can do now is complete the process as I did with that first option where I was doing manually matching. I click generate, closes it down, creates, get my words out, creates the AR receipt against those invoices, and therefore completes that payment process and the customer remittance. So that's the scraping. So same concept as the matching, obviously, but it's looking to, it brings those lines in, scrapes those lines, looks up the customer, having trouble with my words, the date, the value, therefore making it a much more efficient process. Hope that helps, and hope it gives you those two options, or an introduction to those two options around AR customer remittances. Thanks for your time.